Okay, so welcome all to our GSO Student Alum Seminar Series, our networking series, the times when our GSO alums come back and talk to us about their career paths and straight, twisted, or whatever way there may be. So today, for the first time, we're having a panel because we have 3 GSO alums who all went into fisheries science and management careers. All actually were Jeremy Colley's students, though also like Connor got his master's with Candace Oviatt. So there's something very, very fishy about the Colley Lab, I think. So, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Colley to introduce the students or alums.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. And another thing that these 3 have in common is they all enrolled in their PhD program while working full time. So that's something else they have in common. We're going to let them tell their own stories, so I might just mention a few things that you wouldn't read in their LinkedIn profiles. We start with Corinne Truesdale, who hails from Pennsylvania. She graduated with her BS in biology from Temple University. She has traveled quite a bit. She's done an internship in Ghana and Madagascar too, maybe. And she worked as a fishery observer in the Bering Sea, so she certainly has her chops working at sea. She was based in Seattle before starting her MS degree here at GSO, working initially with Candace. So take it away, Corinne.
Right, thanks, Jeremy. So I will, I guess, share my screen. Okay. And I'm going to try to do a pretty brief rundown of, I guess, where I was before I came to GSO, what I've done at GSO, and then where I've been since. So move pretty quickly through this. As Jeremy mentioned, I'm from Pennsylvania. So I grew up in very rural Pennsylvania, very the Amish country part of Pennsylvania, near Lancaster. I was one of those kids who was really into animals, as most kids are, wanted to be a marine biologist or vet, something of that sort. But that manifested because of where I lived in kind of agricultural activities. So I was into horse judging and dairy judging and things like that. So went to college at Temple University in Philly. And there I had a general degree, or I got a general degree in biology, and really tried to kind of expand my horizons and see what opportunities there could be or would be in doing field biology. I think I arrived at a place where I knew I wanted to work in the field with wildlife, and didn't quite know exactly what that would look like. So when I graduated, I looked for jobs, kind of cast a wide net, and ended up with my first job out of undergrad, as Jeremy mentioned, as a fisheries observer in Alaska on commercial fishing vessels. So I did that for a few years, was living and working on commercial fishing boats, and then worked as a technician for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, collecting salmon data at remote fish camps and commercial processing plants. So over the course of 5 years, I tried to gather different experiences in fisheries science and really enjoyed my time doing that. But after a while, kind of got to a point where I felt like I was adept at collecting the fisheries related data, had a lot of experience in the field, knew all these sampling protocols, but I didn't really understand the next steps, which were to take that data, translate it to a stock assessment, and then use something like a stock assessment to inform fisheries management. So this piece of the puzzle was not so clear to me. And with my general degree in biology, I hadn't had coursework that would kind of answer or give me those skills. So it was then that I decided that I needed to return to school, and I started at the Graduate School of Oceanography for my master's degree with Jeremy. And for that work, I was working in collaboration with the Division of Marine Fisheries. My project was co-advised by biologists who worked there. And so I did research to support the assessment and management of the Jonah crab fishery in southern New England, was able to collect data at sea, conduct laboratory growth experiments, analyze those data, and then at the same time really focus my coursework on quantitative fishery science and statistics, which were the skills I wanted to gain from going back to school. I also benefited from the fact that URI has a really great marine affairs program. So at the same time that I pursued my oceanography degree, excuse me, I was able to leverage my funding and pursue a professional master's in marine affairs with Tracy Dalton. And so this allowed me to kind of focus on that piece of the puzzle. So there's fishery science, there's the stock assessment, and then the policy side, which is how you translate the science to management. So I did a social research study by interviewing Jonah crab fishermen, and that really complemented what I did for my oceanography degree, emphasizing coursework in natural resource management for this. So I just wanted to highlight that one of the big things that validated my decision to come to URI was that over the course of 3 years and doing my master's degrees, I got to know a lot of people who worked in different organizations on campus and in the neighboring community at URI, and get exposure to other projects that weren't related necessarily to my thesis work. So I did some work with the Coastal Resources Center on International Fisheries, was able to work on offshore wind survey data analysis. I was able to expand my network through the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Institute, which is a collaborative between DEM and local universities to further marine fisheries research in Rhode Island. And so the community at GSO really was great for me to be able to expand beyond what I was doing for my thesis work to gain these experiences. Excuse me. So that leads me to, so once I finished my degrees in 2018, I was really fortunate to land a position as a principal marine biologist with the Division of Marine Fisheries, which is where I work now. And this position was really, I mean, ideal for me in the sense that working with the division and working for a state division of marine fisheries provided a way for me to continue doing fishery science, which I was really interested in, but also to be at that science policy interface. So be involved in management or have an understanding of how the science I was doing was translating into management. And I think that's something that's unique about what we have at the Division of Marine Fisheries. I think along with that, the fact that we're a small state agency, so we have a very small staff, but there still are many fisheries that operate in Rhode Island, and there are tons of issues that we work on. So everyone wears a lot of different hats, and so I've had opportunities to work across a bunch of different projects within fishery science, which is something I've really appreciated too. I started working as a supervising biologist, so I was promoted last fall. So kept the duties that I have as a principal biologist, but now am working to oversee a team of 7 principal biologists and then a seasonal team of 5 interns. So I'll briefly just go through what we work on, or I guess what a typical day looks like, not that it exists at marine fisheries. So throughout the course of a year, I think things are very seasonal and changing day to day, but I get to participate in a decent balance of fieldwork, data analysis, report writing, interstate meetings, then a lot of just day-to-day logistics in supporting the work of the division. So for fieldwork, I'm the principal investigator for our ventless trap survey, where we are monitoring the abundance of lobster and other crustaceans in Rhode Island state waters. But then I also have an opportunity to participate in other fieldwork that we're doing. So other biologists run their own surveys, and I'm able to fill in on those as needed, which is a really big perk. I think everyone loves being able to work in the field, so it's probably one of my favorite parts. Another thing I spent a lot of time on, and I don't have any pictures at a computer, but that would probably be most representative of what I do most of the time, is work across a lot of different projects doing data analysis and report writing. So a lot of the time this is doing analyses to estimate impacts of regulation changes on fisheries harvest or on the fishing industry. But I've also been involved in modeling fish community structure changes due to coastal infrastructure changes. In this case, it was a power plant up in Mount Hope Bay. Have participated in stock assessment modeling. And then we fulfill a lot of data requests and complete a lot of annual reports for the grants that we work on within the division. Again, I mentioned that we're really fortunate to work to some degree in management at the division, and I participate in interstate bodies where I meet with representatives from other states for the commission and the 2 councils shown here to conduct analyses and to compile documents that are used to support management decisions. So they're provided to the management boards for these species. And and used to make decisions, regulatory decisions for those fisheries. So that's something that I participate in frequently as well. And then I just wanted to briefly mention, I started my PhD a couple of years ago, so I'm working part-time. And I'm really fortunate to be able to do this and to be working on a project that's related to the work that I do at DEM. So working to develop harvest strategies for the Jonah crab fishery, and this is funded by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and will directly contribute to those interstate bodies that I work on for Jonah crab. So that is where I am today, just to give you a brief rundown, and I'm happy to answer questions obviously today, but if anyone wanted to reach out at any point, if you're interested in anything that I presented or had any questions later, feel free to email me.
Anything? We might leave questions till the end and have questions for all. So, because there may be some questions that sort of overlap. So thanks so much, Corinne.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
All right, I will stop sharing.
And back to you, Jeremy.
Okay, good, thanks. Well, I think by the end of the session, you'll be able to guess who works for whom and who's the boss of whom. So next up, we have Conor McManus. Conor's from Boston. He doesn't really talk like that. I think it's because he was sent to good schools, like, for example, BU, where he did his bachelor's degree. He also came to GSO initially to study with Candace Oviatt for his master's degree, so I certainly give Candace credit for that. It seems like Conor was just a boy then, and now he's a father of 2 sons, Logan and Henry, who keep him very busy. And so, if nothing else, Conor is a master of multitasking. Over to you, Conor.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think the jury's still out on that, but we'll see. Okay. So are you guys seeing presenter mode or?
Yeah, we see presenter mode.
So I'm good?
I see your notes in your next slide.
Yeah.
How about that?
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Perfect. All right. So thanks for having me today. And so I guess by way of background, for people interested in marine science, some maybe fall into it, some maybe or have always been interested in it. And I think I'm probably in the latter, as Jeremy noted. From a young age, I always kind of had an affinity for it and always knew this was something that was at least a hobby, if not a career path that I wanted to pursue. And I think that over time, from a young age up through high school, that was embodied through a number of different things that I had pursued, whether it was when spending summers in Falmouth, Mass, taking classes at the Children's School of Science in Woods Hole, or through high school, volunteering every weekend at the New England Aquarium, where I would do outreach and education lectures or work in various galleries, whether it be for things like the amazing jellies, as they call them, or in the Northern Waters Gallery, working on giant Pacific octopus outreach and education or research. So I had always had this, I guess, fire under me to try and pursue fishery science or marine biology. And that was really informative for me in terms of leading me ultimately to Boston University, where I did my undergrad, as Jeremy noted. There's a lot of things that drew me to BU, as Jeremy said, from the area. So had a affinity for being local, but also for a team there of faculty and resources that were really geared towards marine science. One of those was being, at the time, closely knit with the Marine Biological Laboratory, where I spent a summer there working on spiny dogfish and lobster sensory biology research via professors at BU having lab space there. And then probably one of BU's larger aspects for marine sciences being the marine program, or BUMP, where it's a semester-long intensive program or boot camp really in marine science, both how to conduct research in the field, analyze data, and present your results. And some notable things for me from that were getting to continue to work in fisheries, which is a passion of mine, scientific research on sand lance, both ecosystem dynamics and age structure, looking at these little tiny ear bones and trying to understand how old they are. And then also some more field intensive work, like being in Belize for a while, trying to understand the coral reef ecosystem there. And with a number of projects being conducted by us, but one of which understanding the relationship between various cleaner gobies and their coral reef habitat. So, you know, with BU and particularly BUMP, this was really the push that for me that guided me towards wanting to take the next step professionally in marine science, which ultimately led me to GSO for my master's. As Jeremy noted, I joined the Marine Ecosystem Research Lab, working for Candace. Many of you know Merle. It's missing quite a few of these tanks now, but they were there when I was in the lab, and we did a lot of different research at Merle. My thesis focused on understanding how primary production rates have changed in Boston Harbor and Massachusetts Bay as a result of the Boston Water Harbor sewage outfall relocation, or the dirty water, as they call it, being shifted offshore, and understanding the oceanographic drivers in the marine ecosystem out there. And which was great because I got to, you know, study a system that I loved, but being a Candace student, you are thrusted into the Narragansett Bay field as well. And so I spent a lot of time on the bay, driving around small boats to conduct nutrient sampling, water quality measurements, primary production estimates, and all of which fed into research on how lower trophic level productions change in the bay, as well as coastal hypoxia. So this experience for me really, you know, really formulated me as a scientist to think holistically about marine ecosystems, which I give Candace a lot of credit for, and having this more broader sense of trying to understand the dynamics of marine ecosystems. But with my master's, I wasn't quite sure whether, you know, I needed a PhD to achieve my professional goals at that time. I needed to break from the academic treadmill. So at that time I had left and joined RPS ASA, or formerly ASA, and maybe now just RPS. But I worked on the Deepwater Horizon spill, not boots on the ground in the Gulf, but really focused on trying to assess the biological loss from the oil spill, and basically coupling hydrodynamic modeling and oil spill trajectories with the footprint of where we thought marine biota live, particularly fish larvae and zooplankton and benthic communities, trying to understand what was the mortalities from the event, ultimately to help inform settlement cases between NOAA, who was effectively who I was a subcontractor to via ASA, and then BP. So really great experience. Got to work with a wonderful group over at ASA. Our group also working under fellow GSO alum, Deb French McKay, and then also working with a lot of people around the coast in the Gulf of Mexico, from the Southeast Fisheries Science Center of NOAA and various academics. Also somewhat concurrent at this time, I served as a contract employee part-time for the Northeast Fisheries Science Center right there on the Bay campus, working for John Hare, who brought me on to help construct a rubric and tool that allowed for understanding various species climate vulnerability, and trying to, with multiple goals, but two of the larger ones being to understand where our data uncertainties are for various species and whether we can assess whether they're vulnerable to climate change, whether sensitivity or exposure, but then also help prioritize, perhaps research or management needs for those species that are most vulnerable to climate change. And so that works John has led has been really informative in trying to help us as a coast-wide community prioritize and assess species vulnerability to climate change. And I think both my time at ASA and working for John, as well as my master's degree, really solidified for me the direction that I was hoping to go next, in terms of basically coupling oceanography with fisheries. And at that point, with that goal in mind, I knew the skill sets that I needed to get to obtain a career in that direction. But I did not, but that was through, I needed to get those skill sets through more education, in my opinion, at the time. So that led me to go back to school part-time for my doctorate, and effectively looking to use these tools in research questions of fisheries oceanography, and again, in a continued applied manner via a doctorate. And effectively, the way that it played out was, I was looking to conduct a suite of research tools and gain a certain skill sets for basically research needs that NOAA had needed at the time, and that led me to working on mackerel, which had a number of data needs and research needs that were aligned with my interests, that also aligned well with the timing of an impending stock assessment for mackerel. So I'm working with Jeremy, going back to GSO, as well as with John Hare and others at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. My PhD focused on the population dynamics and habitat changes for Atlantic mackerel in the Northeast US shelf. And so I spent many times working with plankton data, first trying to build time series indices of Atlantic mackerel larval abundances to help inform a stock assessment, whether trying to build indices that were reflective of spawning stock or recruitment for use in assessment models. I also looked to try and understand how larval habitat changed through time based on their preferences for zooplankton species, as well as temperature, and trying to see if we've seen a shift in habitat over time with changes in climate. And lastly, I did extensive simulation testing for trying to understand the population trajectories of Atlantic mackerel spanning over 2 centuries, which required digging through old historical records of catch and understanding fishers' knowledge of how the fishery as whole has changed through various gear types and the expansion across Canada and the U.S. waters. And really kind of gave me the whole degree gave me a really nice holistic picture of fisheries science and fisheries oceanography. About halfway through my doctorate, I really getting a sense of where I wanted to go with my career. That's ultimately when I left ASA and joined in DEM. So in my PhD time, I spent half of it working full-time for ASA, half of it working for DEM, and then doing the school part-time or on the weekends. And so that's when I joined the Division of Marine Fisheries, and still here today. I serve as the chief for the division. And for those that don't know us, we're the Marine Fisheries Agency for the state of Rhode Island, and with our ultimate mission being to try and manage and enhance Rhode Island's marine resources, principally being species and their habitats, through conducting various scientific research, which then can be used to inform management decisions regarding their sustainability, and then help educate both stakeholders and the general public on the species, what's in your backyard, and how do we best preserve it for long-term use. We talk often about our program being, half fishery science and half fisheries management. So I think I won't go into all the different science and research that we do, but I think Corinne hit the nail on the head of, we're a small team that works really closely together and works really well together. And because there's so much to do, we all get to do a lot. And we do everything from various dive work to trawl surveys, to habitat surveys, to shark tagging, to marine mammal stranding response work, and everything in between. So I think for those really interested in field work and a variety, it's been, it's certainly the Division of Marine Fisheries offers that, I think, with me being an example of that. To Corinne's point, a large part of our work too is then using science to then inform how we manage these various species and their habitat. And we do it principally through, larger management bodies, whether it's the New England Fisheries Management Council or the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and our participation on these boards and councils, making kind of higher level decisions on regional fisheries management, but then also in our own backyard here with the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council, and really working both the larger groups and then stakeholders here on devising management plans that allow to meet stakeholder needs while ensuring the resources are sustainable. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we do quite a bit of education too for those that aren't engaged in the management process. How do we connect people with their environment, expose people to what Rhode Island has to offer via marine fish and crustaceans and vertebrates, and either just through pure interest or as someone who likes to recreate and interact with these species, and help and continue to inform folks on what we do and why we do what we do to ensure that these species can be here for a long time. And so just a couple quick notes for me, looking back for those, for any current students interested, I guess my big three words of advice would be, don't be afraid of nonlinearity. I think everybody's going to have their own career path and how they get to where they are. And I think with us three being part-time students at night, we're perhaps less traditional, but every path has to be kind of for individuals, has to be custom made, and don't be afraid if it's not the right path traditionally, because it's all dependent on your needs and what works for you. I think for all active students, I would definitely say seek and accept opportunities for two reasons. One, I think this is the time to just be a sponge and soak it all up and learn as much as you can, and both for later on in life, you never know when experiences are going to be useful to you in future work, but then also with every time you take an opportunity, you learn what you like and you don't like, and that's really informative to perhaps helping guide you in a career trajectory one way or the other. And then lastly, and enjoy and embrace your experience. I think, certainly remember, both as a master's and PhD student, long hours, long nights, it's challenging, but I also more fondly remember, the student community, the long-lasting friendships, the support, and I think all of those are elements that I'll always remember from GSO as being informative for my experience, and some of which continue today, obviously with friends, but maybe most relevant for people like Dave Smith and those, the Narragansett Bay Blades, being an alumni and previous student, and such. There are a number of things that I think from my experience still last with me as an alumni and integrated with the GSO community, like the long-lasting GSO Hui hockey rivalry. So with that, I'll happy to answer questions after, but thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, Connor. That's great. Great to talk. And David Smith would love that last slide with the hockey team. He's unfortunately away today, but he'll probably be watching the recording. So back to you, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, last but not least, we have Jason McNamee. He came to Rhode Island from Connecticut. The first time was to start his bachelor's degree at URI, and during that time, he was captain of the URI swim team. And we have swum together sometimes. I think we swam the Save the Bay swim one year together but I think Jay has pretty much retired from swimming now, and he's devoting his energy primarily to mountain biking. But anyhow, he returned to Yukon to do his master's degree, and then returned to Rhode Island the second time to commence employment with Rhode Island DEM, where he is now. So Jay, let's go ahead.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Share my screen. Turn it into a slideshow. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. So I have it's a pretty high level presentation here. And hopefully the best part of it is I've interspersed some advice throughout the slides, and hopefully you can take something away from that. But I thought I'd kind of walk you through my trip through becoming a fisheries scientist and a fisheries manager. And so just like so many stories, mine starts with a night in a bar. And so if you can imagine a younger me, I had way more hair, and I was working my way through a biological oceanography master's degree at the University of Connecticut, like Jeremy mentioned. And I ended up in a bar, got talking to another young man at the bar, and he just happened to mention that he just left a job working as a student researcher for the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management in their Division of Fish and Wildlife. And so I said, well, how long ago did you leave? And he said, just yesterday. And I said, I assume that job's probably still open, huh? And he said, yeah, you should call them. And so that's what I did. I called the very next day, and they were actually pretty psyched. They thought they were going to have this gap in their, in their seasonal researchers for the rest of the summer. And here comes some guy calling them up out of the blue. So long story short, I got the job and started working just a couple of days later. And so here's my first advice, and that is go hang out. You never know who you're gonna run into when you're out having some fun. So always good to get out there and network with folks and chat with them, and you never know what might happen. So I got this new job. I'm super psyched. You guys are all at GSO. I assume you know the little mobile station at the intersection of Route 1 and 138. And if you've ever gotten gas at that intersection and then try to take a left back out onto 138, you'll commiserate with me here. So my very first day, I needed to get some gas. So on my way into work, I pull into that gas station, get some gas, start to take a left out of that parking lot and get in a car accident. And so that's a fun part of the story, but really the advice is you're going to have setbacks. Don't give up, get back in your car and keep going, and just explain your story to the boss, who is then going to want to come out and check for the damage on your car to see if you're making up a story. So I made it into work that day and really had a nice experience. So I worked there for about 2 years. Loved it. It's like a perfect job for a grad student in the summer. I worked with some great people, worked hard, started to create some pretty robust networks. So I met a lot of people, and you'd be surprised, you meet the people you work with, but then you meet a bunch of other people that work throughout the state because you have to run the mail up to the city or all sorts of things like that. So, even these internships, they're important in that trajectory for your career. You build a lot of networks and you meet a lot of people. I did mostly field work, so I got wicked poison ivy. I looked like Rocky Balboa in the first Rocky movie. My eyes were swollen shut. Got Lyme disease, not once, but twice. These are some of the hazards of working out in the field, but wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world. It was a really fun experience. And eventually I got my shot at a full-time position with the department. So my next piece of advice is don't be afraid to start at the bottom. Number one, it's pretty fun there. And number two, you're going to learn a lot along the way. And so this is just some stock footage, but this is what I did in that internship. It wasn't marine fisheries. It was the freshwater program at DEM. And we did a lot of, I electrocuted a lot of fish in those days and did a lot of other cool work as well. Just really fun experience. And just so you know, these positions still exist. They're out there. They have them in the Marine Fisheries program. You should talk to Connor about that if you're interested. And Corinne, actually, both of them. So that job lasted about 2 years, and I eventually got a full-time job at DEM, but it still was not in fisheries. So that first job was in the DEM's Office of Water Resources. It was a great job. Still got out in the field, did a lot of dipping of bottles into water bodies and running over to the Department of Health to get those water samples analyzed. So, you know, it wasn't my dream job, but I learned a ton. And I also began my affinity for math and statistics during that job. Prior to that, I was one of those, oh, I just like the field work. I just like to be the guy with holding the fish. And that was true, still is true. But I started to see the value of quantification of information. And part of that came from the fact that at Water Resources, I was working shoulder to shoulder with lots of engineers, and those guys and gals are fond of math. And so I got some good exposure to that and learned a lot from working with them. I also learned a lot about federal processes. And so when I was with Water Resources, what I was doing was I was working on these, they're EPA projects, and they're called total maximum daily load projects. You're basically assessing water bodies and seeing how the water bodies are, how the impairment is either improving or not improving for the water classification. So that's what we did. I learned a lot about working with federal agencies. That was EPA in that case. And so the next piece of advice is the path of your career will likely not be straight. Embrace it and learn as much as you can on the way. Every single thing you do, whether you end up right in your dream job right away or you have to work your way to it, you're going to learn things, you're going to create networks, and it's all valuable, and it's all a piece of the path. So recognize that and embrace it as you're walking the walk. So I worked there, I think, for about 2.5 years. That was up in Providence, and a job came available. It was a job with the at the time was the Division of Fish and Wildlife, but within the Marine Fisheries program. And this was what I had always had my eye on. This was my dream job. I'm going to work in that Marine Fisheries program. And my vision of that was I was going to jump right on a boat and I was going to be out. And again, I was going to be that guy catching fish. Didn't quite work out that way. When you're new in a job, you often have to take the job that no one else wants. And so that's what happened with me. I started off running the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council. And then I did a lot of filing of regulations, kind of simultaneously with the Marine Fisheries Council. I eventually moved on to getting a field position. So I was the principal investigator on the the Narragansett Bay Seine survey. And so got to finally get out of the office, get out of those stuffy meetings, getting yelled at by fishermen. And I got to run a boat, and I got to learn how to work fishing gear. And I finally got to be that guy holding those fish and counting those fish. And from there, it kept going. I eventually became a supervisor, just like Corinne is now, and worked my way up to chief, just like Connor is now. And again, just can never, I couldn't think of any other way to kind of make my way through this career. I learned a ton. It's basically the same advice I've already given. I just sort of reset it and rebuilt my way through the Marine Fisheries program in this case, but started at the bottom, learned a ton about state processes, learned how to file regulations, learned about Rhode Island general law. And while that stuff's not super exciting, you would be shocked at how useful it is in other parts of your job and how effective you can be in that job when you understand those processes really well. Then I got to run a boat. I got to work fishing gear. Then I got a taste of a little more math and a little more statistics, and I got really deeply involved in stock assessment. And at this point in my career, I participated on more stock assessment processes than I will enumerate for you here. But suffice it to say, that's what drove me to go back to school to get my PhD, which I did with Jeremy and just finished up back in 2018. And then being that supervisor, being that chief, that was also a rewarding part of my career in that I had the opportunity to build the program in the way that I thought it should be built and pull the team together that I wanted to pull together and build that team with my leadership team and build something together. Super, super gratifying. So back in February of 2020, I got, and this sort of brings us up to present day, I was promoted to Deputy Director for Rhode Island DEM's Bureau of Natural Resources. So if you think about the timing of February 2020, that was fun to take on this giant new job about 2 weeks before we ran into a global pandemic. So that was great timing, but we slogged our way through it. Fisheries is still in my portfolio, but so is a bunch of other things. And there's a sort of a flow chart, couldn't think of that word, a flow chart there on the right with all the programs that are within the Bureau, everything from forestry to law enforcement, fish and wildlife, coastal resources, agriculture. So lots of stuff that I think about these days, but lucky for me, both my bosses that I've had since I've been in this job have let me stay in fisheries to a shocking degree. So I'm going to keep doing that until they tell me to stop. So I keep my hands in the fisheries world pretty deeply, even to this day. So just to wrap up, my career path's not been straight, not exactly what I wanted right from the get-go, but it's been rewarding, fulfilling, and it wouldn't have worked out this well in any other way. Sometimes these things just happen the way that they need to happen. I've been afforded the opportunity to work with scientists at the national level, internationally as well. I served on the track for a number of years, which is a partnership with Canada. And we worked on critical fisheries topics and did a lot of good in the fisheries world. I've also been afforded the opportunity to network with young scientists. And in a few cases, you've learned about a couple of them today, I was able to bring those talented scientists onto the DEM team. And that's a part of my job that I absolutely love. And just my final, and this is my sales pitch part of the presentation. If you have a desire to create change and have an immediate impact on the things you care about, you can't beat working for a state agency. There's really no other opportunity to really have a thought and turn it into a law within a couple of months. That's what we do. And as Corinne and Connor both told you, you won't ever get bored working for a state agency. We're lean and mean, and you get to do everything from management to science to filing regulations, you name it, we do it in the state. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Veronica, to take us to the next topic.
Thank you so much, Jason. Well, that's been a really fun to see your career, but also how tells us a lot about Rhode Island DEM.